My name is Jerry Gill. Today is December 8th, 2010. I'm visiting with Justice Stephen Taylor in his office here in Oklahoma City at the Capitol. This interview is for the O State Storage Project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. And Justice Taylor, thank you for taking time away from your duties to visit with us today.
I'm happy to do anything for Oklahoma State University.
Well, you've contributed to the state and to your alma mater, Oklahoma State University, for many years and contributed much. And I want to visit with you about those things, but could we first back up, talk a little about your early life?
Oh, sure.
Where you grew up, your parents,
Yeah.
some of the things that defined you as you were growing up?
Yeah. You may just kind of take it from there.
Sure.
I was born in Henrietta, June 7th, 1949. My father worked for Southwestern Bell Telephone, and we lived in Henrietta up until May of January of 1954. And in January of 1954, my father was transferred by Southwestern Bell to McAlester. And so from January of 1954, when I was 5 years old, the rest of my growing up was in McAlester. My dad worked for Southwestern Bell. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, which was typical of the 1950s, middle-class family. I had two younger sisters, and I had a very happy 1950s middle class growing up in McAlester. A lot of good friends and family in McAlester, and attended Will Rogers Elementary School, McAlester Junior High School, McAlester High School. I became very interested even in junior high, I knew that I had an interest in government and politics and things, and was fortunate there in McAlester to have a governor, then Lieutenant Governor George Nye was from McAlester and took an interest in me and became a friend of mine.
Well, so he was your teacher?
No, he wasn't. He was past being a teacher then. Okay. He taught history in the high school back in the early 50s.
He was already Lieutenant Governor.
He was already Lieutenant Governor at this time, and so I had the great fortune of having him take an interest in me. And then also Speaker Carl Albert was from McAlester, and he also took an interest in me. And so I had Carl Albert and George Nye to be sort of mentors from the time I was in junior high and high school, and they inspired me in many ways. I was involved in student government at the high school and became president of the student body, and I was active in debate, and I was not much of an athlete, although I was a pretty good runner, and to this day I'm still a runner. And so I was involved in some track at McAlester High School. But my main focus in junior high and high school was debate and speech and student government, and just really had I feel very blessed to have had a growing up that was really very good and very grounded, and great family, mom and dad and two sisters, and then I always say the old African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. I'm certainly a product of that, because friends and family all over McAlester helped raise me, and I'm forever, grateful for that.
Justice Taylor, were there some values and principles that you learned from your parents and from your experience growing up there that helped influence your success later in life?
Well, yes. My mom and dad were both they concentrated for all three of us kids, and I always had summer jobs and things that I had to do, and I had responsibilities, and they taught us about work and discipline and studying, and so that was really important. I was very fortunate to have mom and dad that were just really dedicated to all three kids, and that really made a difference. And it was inspiring to me to know that I had a mom and dad that loved me, and we were pure, just a middle class family, and basically lived month to month on my dad's income. Back then, I never knew. It was just I had everything I thought that I needed and wanted, but it was just it was really a very typical 1950s scene around our house. But my parents were very good, strong, disciplined parents. My family, extended family and friends there in McAlester, they took an interest in me. I was always, everywhere I went around town, there was somebody, looking out for, there's Steve Taylor, and how you doing, Steve, and what's up, and there was you were always around people who had an interest in you and knew what you were up to, and by the same token, also, if you were up to no good, it would be discovered soon. So it was just part of the, and I won't admit to ever being up to no good, but it was always just a part of this this whole community of growing up. And then I mentioned the good fortune of having George and I and Carl Albert to be a part of my life from the time I was in junior high. And so it was really an inspiring, important time for me.
You talked about some part-time jobs you had as a student. Could you tell us about some of those?
Yeah, I was heavily into the lawn mowing business. I mowed a lot of the yards, pushing a lawnmower up and down the streets in my general neighborhood. And then there were 2 summers when I was a senior in high school and a freshman at OSU. 2 summers, it was during the height of the Vietnam War, and the McAlester, at that time the McAlester Naval Ammunition Depot was in full force building bombs for Vietnam, 500-pound and 2,000-pound bombs. And so 2 summers I worked on the bomb line out at the at the Naval Ammunition Depot then. It's now the Army Ammunition Depot. And that was very difficult work. Serious work. I mean, we were literally building 2,000-pound bombs and 500-pound bombs, and one summer I worked on the bomb line where we were wearing protective clothing, and it was a dangerous situation. Static electricity, was a constant safety concern, and my job on the bomb line was we were up on these catwalks, and I put a funnel in the tail end of a 2,000-pound bomb, and then it would move to the next station and pour liquid TNT into the bomb shells. And I did that for 3 months one summer. I was on the graveyard shift, and I'd go out there and spend every night, with this TNT was dust and everything, and it was it was quite a situation. I made good money, made enough money to not have to work during the school year, because I made enough working, particularly the graveyard shift. You got extra money for going to work at midnight. And then the next summer I worked on the same bomb line, but instead of pouring TNT into bombs, I was down on my belly on the bomb line was on a railroad track, and there was a cable system that pulled the cars through the assembly line, and these cables had to be maintained and serviced, and if they broke, they had to be repaired. And I worked on the crew that took care of the cables, and so we were down on the railroad track under the cars repairing the cables. So I learned all about hard work those 2 summers, and about safety and hard work. And of course, I always felt like I contributed something to the war effort, in that we were building bombs that were ending up, unfortunately, going over and dropping in Vietnam. But those 2 summers, and then probably the most interesting summer work that you would now see Justice of the Supreme Court, I was a car salesman.
Would you buy a car from this guy?
Yes. Would you buy a car from this guy? I realized after 2 summers on the bomb line that I wanted to find some different work. And so the Olds Cadillac dealer in McAlester sold new Oldsmobiles and Cadillacs and had a big used car operation. He hired me, and then I ended up working 6 summers in a row, all through OSU undergraduate and all through law school. 6 summers in a row, I worked at this new car dealership, and I sold cars. And then I began over the years to get more involved in helping with the management of it was a small business with, probably 15, 20 employees. And I worked in the parts department. I worked helping write service orders in the service department. I sold cars. I helped with bookkeeping. And my primary responsibility was selling cars, but they ended up putting me to work all kinds of places in the dealership over those 6 summers. And I got to tell you that those 6 summers were an important, critical part of my education, because there's nothing that teaches you more about people than, out on a hot car lot in the middle of July trying to sell a used car to somebody, in 100-degree temperature out on the car lot. You learn about people, you learn how to communicate with people and deal with people, and I think that's a critical part of anybody's education, the people skills and learning to deal with people, and whoever would walk on the car lot, be prepared to deal with them and to talk with people, and people from all walks of life, from all education levels, and diverse people that would come on the car lot looking for a car. Whether it was a new Cadillac, we sold brand new Cadillacs, and then we sold 10-year-old Chevrolet Biscaynes, out on the car lot. And so I dealt with all kinds of folks and enjoyed every minute of it. And probably, if I had to look back and say, where did I get some of my most important education, it was at that car dealership those 6 summers in McAlester.
Were you a pretty good salesman?
I was a good salesman. I sold a lot of cars. And learned a lot, made good money. And then I went at OSU and at law school during the school year. I continued to sell cars. I sold a lot of cars on campus at OSU to my fraternity brothers and friends, because they all knew that I sold cars, and so they would say, "Can you find me a good deal on this or that?" And so during the school year, I would probably sell typically 5 or 6, 7, 8 new cars or used cars during the school year to fraternity brothers and friends. So it was a good part of my education. So now, people can say this Supreme Court justice was a car salesman.
I forgot to ask, what year did you graduate from McAlester?
McAlester High School, 1967.
Then did you enroll that fall at Oklahoma State?
I enrolled to Oklahoma State and started at Oklahoma State in the fall of 67.
What influenced you to enroll at Oklahoma State?
Well, one of I was the first of my immediate family to go to college. My dad, my mom did not go to college. One influence was my aunt, Billy Sue Harmon, my mother's sister, was a professor, an associate professor in the theater department at OSU. She was an OSU, an A&M graduate, and then got her graduate degrees at University of Kansas, and then came back to teach at OSU in the theater department. The chairman of the department back then was Vivia Locke, Bunny Locke, who was an icon in the arts and sciences and in the theater department at OSU. And my aunt was one of her proteges and taught under Bunny, Vivia Locke. And so my aunt was some influence, because she was a professor there at OSU, and that I'd been there on campus visiting her. And then another influence, a young guy named Wes Watkins came to McAlester High School when I was a junior. He worked for the high school college relations at OSU, and came to McAlester High School and made a pitch for OSU. And I remember to this day young Wes Watkins coming into my English class at McAlester High School talking about OSU, and I got to visit with him, and that influenced me also. But I applied at OU and OSU, got accepted both places, but really the choice was OSU without any question. I never really seriously considered undergraduate at OU. I had a thought even then that I would be going to law school and would be going to OU to law school, and so that was another factor that I wanted to experience. I wanted to go to OSU, and then if I could go to OU later, which I ended up doing. But OSU was by far my first choice.
Well, what was your first impression of the campus when you got there as a student?
Friendship, the relationships immediately, the relationships on campus that I developed. I developed lifelong friends from the very first week I was there. I went through Rush and pledged Kappa Sigma fraternity, and my fraternity house became the center of my life and the center of my university family. But again, I got involved on campus in campus chest and in student government and later Blue Key so those were really wonderful days. Then it was the friends that I developed and the friendliness and the friendships there at OSU that were, critical. I was part of the Robert Comm was the president, and I was part of the president's leadership class that he had, and as a freshman, got to meet all my fellows in that organization, and again to this day, some friends that I've made all of my life. So it was just immediate connection of friends and a friendly, comfortable place. It was the first time I'd been away from home in my whole life, and so it was a immediate comfort factor on campus that I'll never forget.
What was your major? Did you declare a major that fall?
Political science, and
Stayed with it.
I stayed with it. I was political science from start to finish.
Why political science?
Because that was my interest. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was, some kids can tell you every player in baseball or football, or some kids had interest in football or basketball or baseball, and knew all about every player on every team. I had an interest in politics. I could tell you every governor in the state, every senator, every congressman, politics was my government and politics and public policy. I had an interest in that, and by the time I got to OSU, that was, and so political science is what I wanted to study. I never necessarily planned on going into politics myself necessarily, and I did to some extent in city government later, but it was just the interest that I had. That was what I liked to study and think about.
Where did the interest come from?
I guess from Speaker Albert and Governor Nye, or I guess. But it was a strong interest from the time I was in early high school days, and I guess Nye and Albert had a lot to do with it. But I think I would have had the interest anyway.
Per your previous conversation, you pretty much knew that law school is what you wanted to do when you enrolled.
When I started freshman year at OSU, I knew then that I wanted to go to law school, because I saw that was the way that I could, have a life in the law, but also it's a way to be involved in public policy and political policy, and then also the law.
You talked about some of your involvement in student activities and student leadership organizations. Were there some highlights for you that you kind of point out in your student experience years?
Well, yeah. First, the fraternity, the Kappa Sigma fraternity. I became involved in the government of our house, and was an officer for 2 of the 3 years that I was at the fraternity house. I lived in the fraternity house the whole 4 years. And I was involved in the government of the fraternity. But I guess the highlight of my time at OSU would be when I served in the Student Senate. I enjoyed that a lot. And there were we had some pretty tough times then. It was a time when we had some difficult days of Lou Bullock was the president of the student body when I was Ross McKnight was president of the student body my junior year, and then Lou Bullock was president my senior year. And we had some really tough student issues. My senior year, Abby Hoffman was invited to speak on campus, and there was a lot of turmoil about that, and lawsuits filed about trying to stop him from coming and so on. And then the Vietnam War was going on. There were demonstrations on campus. Kent State, the student killings at Kent State. All of these things happened when I was there, and even OSU, and I say even OSU, became embroiled in this, and there were some very tough times on campus, some tense times. Abe Hesser was the vice president of the university for student affairs and so on, and Dr. Comm was president, and the Student Senate was involved in some pretty turmoil.
Could I ask you, do I remember this correctly from some previous conversations, Harry Birdwell?
Harry and I were very good friends.
Were you his campaign manager?
I was his campaign chairman for the Greek. When he ran for president of the student body, I was his campaign chairman for the fraternities.
Okay.
He I sort of managed his campaign in all the fraternity houses. He had a campaign manager for the sororities, fraternities, residence halls. I mean, Harry, as you know, Harry was well organized, and Harry was a good friend of mine. We served in the student senate together, and then when he ran for president, he asked me to help him in the fraternities, and I was his campaign chairman in the fraternities. And Ross McKnight, who is my friend to this day, was president of the student body my junior year, and then Lou Bullock was president my senior year, and then Harry was running to be president. I helped him with his campaign, but he served after I graduated. But Ross and I were very good friends, and Ross was my mentor in student government. I mean, he took me under his wing and was really the one who helped me manage my campaign. In fact, if one person gets credit for me winning my seat on the student senate, it was Ross, because he helped form the organization to get us organized, and it was called ROSS, Responsible Oklahoma State Students.
Great.
Formed by Ross McKnight. Ross was a planner and an organizer even back in those days, and so I always give Ross credit for giving me my start in politics.
And what constituency did you represent?
The arts and science.
Arts and sciences.
Yeah, I was arts and science student senator.
Well, looking back, reflecting back on your student experience, were there some special memories for you, some special moments that you recall?
Well, not anything offhand. I mean, every day was a good day. Getting elected to student senate was a highlight. Being inducted into Blue Key was a highlight. I served as chairman of the election board, and we had some tough election contests that I had to resolve, and but the highlight really were the friendships. I mean, I've gotten friends to this day that I've served with and worked with at OSU my 4 years there. The highlight really was, I always kind of think about my days at OSU as it was a 4-year laboratory. It was a 4-year laboratory where for 4 years I was in this laboratory experimenting with leadership and experimenting with methods of leadership and strategy, and learning about student government, which really teaches you about government and dealing with people and helping people and making friends. And so the highlight really was that I was in this laboratory for 4 years experimenting and by trial and error learning things. And so my education at OSU was as much out of the classroom as it was in the classroom. I was a pretty good student. I had about probably 3.5, 3.4 grade average. I wasn't a straight A student, but I had a good grade average, and I did good in class. And one thing I always did was go to class. I figured out early on that if you just show up and take notes and pay attention, you can make a B. I figured that out. If you just go to class, take notes, pay attention, you can make a B. And if you really apply yourself, you can make an A. And there was really no excuse to make a C unless you just blew it off. And so I figured that out early on. Probably my pledge days at the fraternity taught me that. They drilled that in me, go to class and all that. But so I learned a lot in class, but I learned just as much out of class, on campus, dealing with all the things that I was involved in. And I always tell kids now, when you go off to wherever you go, OSU or OU or any place, get involved in the campus. Don't just go to class and then go back to your apartment or go home or whatever. And I know some kids work, and I was fortunate to have a job in the summer that I made enough money in the summer to pretty much pay my way with a little help from my parents for the school year. And I know things are a little different, and tuition's higher now maybe relative to what you make in the summer. But I learned so much outside of class. And so, that's something that I really encourage. University is more than sitting in a classroom.
It is. Justice, let me ask you though, speaking of classroom though, were there some faculty and other individuals that influenced your development as a student?
Yeah. two in particular. Dr. Guy Donnell was a political science professor, and Dr. Tom Keelhorn was a political science professor. And both of them were my two, they were the political science professors that really inspired me. Dr. Donnell was a hands-on political science professor who taught us about government and how government works, about the structure of government and about how government works, how government serves people, and then Dr. Keelhorn was more of an abstract view. Dr. Keelhorn taught us about the people in politics and about this political strategy, political polling, political learning to make government, learning to meld government and the wishes of the people. And I can remember, I took every class both of them taught, and I look forward to going to their class because I'd sit back and listen to them lecture and just soak it up, just love it. And when the bell rang, it was like, well, I wish this class wasn't over. So those two really in particular.
Dr. Sayre and the staff at that time, Harold Sayre.
Yes, and I remember him and have a very high opinion of him. I'm now drawing a blank, but there was a speech professor that I took some speech classes from, and I'm drawing a blank, and I wish I weren't because but there was a speech professor that also I would put up there with Donnell and Keelhorn, and I can't think of his name now, but he was really good, and I took every class he took.
Was he the debate coach also?
No, it was the debate coach was the golfer's dad, Doug Toole. Fred Toole was the debate coach. What was his name? This was another speech teacher who taught with Dr. Toole, and I can look at his name and find it later or something. Okay. But anyway, I give credit to him also.
You've touched on this a little bit, but I might ask you again, how did your academic and leadership opportunities influence your life and prepare you for your subsequent career after you left?
Well, knowing I wanted to go to law school, I took as many classes that I could that might help me study the law. Surprisingly, some of the classes that I didn't really realize at the time would help me in law school, but ended up really helping me a lot in law school were English classes. I took several English classes without really, I enjoyed them, and of course as an arts and science major I was required to take a lot of them, but it turns out that a lot of the English literature and composition classes that I took at OSU really helped me in law school, because so much of law school is reading and writing. It's about the law, but you also have to know how to effectively read text and also how to write, because all your exams in law school and everything are essay exams. So my English classes at OSU really helped.
So what year did you graduate from OSU?
71.
71. Then you enrolled at the University of
Oklahoma
Law School?
Straight to University of Oklahoma College of Law.
Are there some highlights of your law school experience you'd want to mention?
Well, that was a much different experience because it is such an intense academic, disciplined academic situation. I was not involved much at all in the day-to-day life of the campus and the student life at the University of Oklahoma. My whole existence at OU was focused on making good grades in law school because it was highly competitive and very difficult, particularly the first year and a half. A lot of people back then, they admitted quite a few students with the idea that the first year a bunch of them were going to fail and flunk out. It's highly competitive to get admitted, and once you get admitted, you're not. But back then there was a big a fail rate. So my time at OU, I was not involved much at all in student government, student life. I was concentrating on going to class, studying, and making good grades in law school. because it was so competitive and really quite difficult. Law school was by far the most difficult academic challenge I had ever faced. And OSU prepared me well for it, and I ended up doing fairly well at law school. But it took a lot of work, a lot more work, and a lot more. I just didn't take the time to do the other things that I'd done.
So interesting. As opposed to going straight into your career, then you joined the Marine Corps.
Right.
Can you talk about your Marine Corps experience?
The Marine Corps came up. I joined the Marine Corps again. Talking about, I mentioned Vietnam. This was in the height of the Vietnam days, and back then there was a lottery for the draft, and you had a lottery number. They drew names and drew birth dates, and your birth date determined your lottery status, your draft status. I had a very low number, so I was going to get drafted, and rather than just get drafted, I looked into finding a way to have a little control over this military career that I was destined to have. So the Marine Corps at the time had a huge need for lawyers, and they had a program that allowed, this was when I was a junior at OSU, and I looked into this, and they had a program that allowed undergraduate to join the Marine Corps, go through the officer candidate training, which was a very difficult, back then and still is, but very difficult training, summer. And then if you successfully completed that, then when you graduated, you were commissioned as second lieutenant, and then they would let you go to law school. They didn't pay you anything. They didn't help you pay for law school. They didn't pay you any money during law school, but they allowed you to, they just kind of gave you a deferment to go to law school because they needed lawyers. And then you owed them, instead of 2 years active duty, you owed them 4 years active duty. It doubled your obligation.
Oh, okay.
So I did that. And so when I was I'll never forget this, I was a junior. It was in December of my junior year at OSU. I went over to the student union and sat down at the OSU student union with a Marine Corps recruiter. He explained all this to me. And then the next day I went back and signed up. And then the summer between my junior and senior year, I went to Quantico, Virginia, and had the toughest 3 months of my entire life.
I can imagine.
It was a compact 3-month officer candidate school where they just, you talk about the fail rate. My platoon started off with 53 people and 34 graduated.
Wow.
In 3 months, it went from 53 to 34. And it was the toughest 3 months of my life. I learned more about myself that summer and what I could do, and it was very difficult. But I successfully completed that, and then when I graduated OSU in '71, I was commissioned a second lieutenant. In fact, sworn in to the Marine Corps at the student union at Oklahoma State University. On the day I graduated, I became a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and then on that day, they just basically said, okay, you go to law school, and when you graduate law school and pass the bar, let us know. Now, I stayed in touch with them, and in fact, several times during law school, I was called on to go help with, help with recruiting duty or something like that. But no, I didn't get paid or didn't have any obligation. It was just I'd volunteered to help. Now, if you ended up not finishing law school or flunking out of law school, then you would just go straight on in to the Marine Corps immediately. And then when I graduated law school, by then I had accumulated time and grade, and so I was a senior first lieutenant. Every Marine officer, much different than the Army and Navy and Air Force, their lawyers go straight to legal training. In the Marine Corps, every Marine officer, even the lawyers, are first infantry platoon commanders.
Wow.
So I went with all the other Marine officers to a 9-month infantry platoon commander course, which was a very difficult 9 months straight out of law school. I just passed the bar exam, and then I find myself crawling on my belly in the mud in Virginia, learning to be an infantry platoon commander. And then after you successfully complete that, then they send you to your military legal training. And then I went from there to the 2nd Marine Division. By then, the Vietnam War had ended. While we were in this infantry platoon commander program, the Vietnam War was still going, and we all assumed we probably would end up going to Vietnam. Well, the Vietnam War ended. That was in May of '75 when they were bringing helicopters in and pulling people off rooftops in Saigon. So that was over, and then I went to the 2nd Marine Division, and I was a prosecutor and then a defense counsel. Was chief defense counsel for a military, for a Marine Corps amphibious brigade in Northern Europe. And then later was fortunate to get to be a military judge my last year on active duty. Great experience. I wouldn't trade those 4 years in the Marine Corps for anything. You know, in a way, it was foisted on me because of the draft. But it's one of those things in life that, you know, things happen in your life that are for the best. If I'd had a high draft number, I probably would have never gone over to the student union and talked to the Marine Corps recruiter because I had a high draft number. I'm not going to get drafted, so no need to worry about it. Well, because of my low draft number, I went over to the OSU student union and talked to a Marine Corps recruiter, and it really changed my life for the best. Because those 4 years in the Marine Corps, again, it's just part of life. The Marine Corps changed my life. It changed me. It gave me a discipline. It gave me a sense of service and a sense of responsibility and discipline. And to this day, as a judge, and for the last 26 years as a judge, every day the Marine Corps and what I learned in the Marine Corps and the discipline that the Marine Corps instilled in me and the sense of pride and the sense of responsibility, it helps me do my work every day. So it's one of those things that, you know, at the time, it was like, well, I'm going to go serve, you know. And it was not necessarily something that you look forward to doing, but it was one of those things that I look back on it, and it was an important part of my life and the experience of my life and and the discipline and who I am. To this day, I'm a Marine. I mean, I'm a lot of things. I'm an OSU cowboy. I'm an Oklahoman, but I'm a Marine, and I'll always be a Marine. And so it's really important to me. It really is.
When you then stepped down from your responsibilities, I don't know if retirement's from or
I didn't retire. I just served my 4 years active duty and then left. I was promoted to major at the very end.
Okay.
But I did not serve, you know, after my active duty, so I did not retire. I'm not retired. I just served 4 years and out.
Then did you? But you didn't stay in the reserves?
No, I did not.
Got out. Okay.
The nearest reserve unit to McAlester, where I moved back home, was in Dallas, and I was in private law practice at the time, and it was just very difficult to have to go to Dallas once a weekend, and I just didn't stay in the reserves.
So you went back to your hometown?
I went back after the Marine Corps. I went back to McAlester and joined an established law firm in McAlester, and became a partner about a year later in the law firm. It was Gocher and Taylor when I became a partner. And I practiced law in that law firm for nearly 7 years.
So you went back what year?
I went back to McAlester in 1978.
78?
Yeah.
80?
And then 84, my old friend Governor George Nye appointed me to the district court bench. He appointed me to the associate district judge of Pittsburgh County in March of 84. So from 78 to 84, I was in private law practice and involved in city government in McAlester. And then in 84, Governor Nye appointed me to the bench, and I've been a judge since that time.
Could you talk a little bit about your judicial experiences and roles?
Yeah, to stay chronological, let me just talk a little about the law practice and the city government. In that way, we won't have to go back to it, and it'll stay chronological. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I got married. When I was in the Marine Corps, I married my wife Mary. I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina. My wife, Mary, was from Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, which was about 50 miles away. And she was a graduate of the University of North Carolina, and she was teaching school in Jacksonville, where the Marine Corps base was. And one of my fellow Marine officers, Mary, had his kid in class, and he one day said something about, you need to meet my kid's school teacher. And so we ended up on a blind date, and literally a year later, we got married. A year from the day of the blind date to the date of the marriage. Of course, that wasn't by accident. We planned, we decided why not get married on the day we had our blind date a year later. But so I got married and we moved back to my hometown, and this law firm had been waiting on me, in effect, to come back. And so I was involved in a very busy law practice, enjoyed the law practice, a lot of trial work. I was in the courtroom a lot. And the political bug in me and the public policy bug in me came out real fast. And back home in '78 and in 1980, I ran for the McAlester City Council against, he was an incumbent and had been in office for a long time. And he was a fine man. I didn't run against him, but just ran for the office and got out and knocked on every door in the Second Ward and ended up being elected to the City Council in 1980, and enjoyed that very much. And then in 1982, I ran for mayor and ended up being elected mayor of McAlester, and I was 31, I think. To this day, the youngest mayor ever to serve in McAlester, and served 2 years as mayor. Great experience, great challenge for particularly a young guy, and I enjoyed it, and we did a lot of good things. And then in March of '84, this judicial position came open, and I went through the process and got nominated as one of the 3 people for the position. And then Governor Nye was the governor, and of course he'd known me since I was in the 8th grade, and he appointed me to the court. And so I was a young associate district judge in Pittsburgh County in March of '84, and have been a judge since.
Different responsibilities and different roles, though.
Right. I served as associate district judge in Pittsburgh County for 10 years, 11 years. And then in '94, I was elected chief judge for the 18th Judicial District, which is Pittsburgh and McIntosh County. And then from '84 till 2004, 10 years, I served as chief judge of Pittsburgh and McIntosh counties. Very busy district. And so for those 21 years as a trial judge, I loved the work. I loved the work. I was in the courtroom nearly every day, trying jury cases and non-jury cases, and lawyers and witnesses and jurors, and all of the activity of a busy trial court. I thrived on it and enjoyed it. Had some really great experiences, professional experiences, some major trials, and just a wonderful experience. 26 years, 21 years in the trial courts. So, and that's, I left politics behind at that point, because as a judge, we are strictly prohibited from being involved in any kind of political activity. So I left politics behind. My involvement in politics, I still to this day am a student of politics, and I follow politics and public policy to this day, but only as a citizen and as a student and an observer. I cannot be involved in politics.
You talked about that switch from practicing law to then being a judge. Did you always know when you first started your practice that you wanted to be a judge?
Well, the first hint I had that I wanted to be a judge was when I was in the Marine Corps. I was just at the right time, at the right place, and a military judge position came open. And the staff judge advocate that I worked for at the 2nd Marine Division took a liking to me, and really to my surprise, he called me in one day and said that this judge position was open and he wanted to recommend me for it. And I was at that time a senior captain, and normally these judge positions were only for majors and above. And so I was surprised and flattered, and he wanted to recommend me, and he recommended me to the commanding general, and I got appointed. Yeah. And so I got to serve the last year as a judge in the Marine Corps, and I really enjoyed it. It was one of those deals that I got a taste of it, and I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. And when I left, I thought, someday I may want to get back on the bench, and really had not given it much thought. And then literally, in fact, I find out, this is a funny story, our son Wilson was born October 30th of 1984. And my wife is at the McAlester Regional Hospital. Our brand new baby had been born that morning, and I was there in the delivery room, and then we were celebrating the birth of our child, and we are in the hospital room, and I get a call that day that the judge, who was one of our local judges, had decided to step down. And so I'm finding out, I'm consumed with my new child, and then I find out that this judicial position opens on the very same day. So I had to then start turning my wheels. Do I want to go for this? Mm-hmm. And I immediately, in fact, my wife and I talked about it in the hospital room with our little baby, and, life, you talk about life-changing events. You've got a brand new child on your lap that's hours old, and you're thinking about giving up your law practice. And I was mayor, the sitting mayor, resigning as mayor and giving up my law practice. And here we've got this hours-old baby in my lap. So it was quite a life-changing day, October 30th, 1984. And the next day, we decided I'm going to go for it. So I put the word out, in town that I'm going to be one of the applicants for the job. And then I went through the long process of Judicial Nominating Commission and OSBI background investigations and all that, and then ended up as one of the top 3 persons.
Can you explain how that works? When you express your interest in it, what do you have to do?
You apply for the vacancy.
Okay.
Then and everybody that's interested applies. Then the Judicial Nominating Commission has the OSBI do a complete background investigation on you. Then you're interviewed by the Judicial Nominating Commission. And then they select 3 of all, however many applicants there are. They pick the top 3 and send those 3 names to the governor. And then the governor interviews those top 3, and from those 3, he appoints a new judge. So I was one of the 3, and Governor Nye was the governor. So I have to admit that, it was a pretty good deal. I felt pretty good that I was in pretty good shape, because he knew me, and so it was just one of those deals that how life turns and the relationships you have from way back in junior high, and then here I am sitting in front of he's now governor, and I've known him since I was in junior high, and but he always says to this day, I picked the right guy and the best guy, even though he was my friend.
Well, of course, Nye it was that way, wasn't he?
Yeah.
If you're equally qualified, if you could pick a friend.
Sure, yeah.
Well, so as a presiding judge, what principles do you attempt to live out, and do you expect others in your court to do?
Well, now you're talking about back as a trial judge when I was chief judge, or I'm going to be chief justice here at the court, at the Supreme Court, starting January 1st. Right. Are you referring back to the trial judge?
Back to trial, because I want to come back and sort of double it. And you'll book in it with having, first of all, just as a trial.
Okay, as a trial judge, what I tried as a young trial judge, I learned from my more senior trial judges, and then as I became a chief judge and a more senior trial judge, what I tried to learn and then later teach was trial judges, their foremost duty is to conduct their courts and their business and their lives in such a way that the public and the citizens have confidence in what goes on at the courthouse, that it's fair. Mm-hmm. And so my mission every day, the 21 years I was a trial judge, was to not only live my life so that people never had any doubt that I was a person of integrity and honesty and that they could trust me to be fair, but I also did my job in such a way that people would hopefully have confidence that every day when I went out on that bench, and I taught other judges to do this, that you've got to run that court in such a way that there is no question that whatever happens, whatever decisions come out of your courtroom, that they are fair and that they're based on the law and the evidence of the case, without regard to who is in the courtroom, who they may be, or what their station in life may be, and no matter what kind of case it is. I mean, I used to tell judges that whether it's what you would call a routine case that's you do every day, or it's a first-degree murder case or a multi-million-dollar civil case, the people in that courtroom, it's very likely one of the most important days in their life, and you need to remember that this is a big day, an important day for the litigants in the courtroom. They're there in that courtroom, and for the criminal defendant, their liberty's on the line, their life may be on the line. In divorce cases, people's lives and family and custody of their kids is on the line. In civil cases, it may be make or break money issues on the line. And so the trials had to be such that no matter what the decision and the outcome of the trial is, that people had confidence that, well, I may not agree with what happened, but it was a fair trial. And so my job and my mission as a trial judge always was that when people left my courtroom, even if they disagreed with what happened, and even if they were disappointed in what happened, at least that they would say it was a fair trial. And and I tried to conduct every trial that way, so that if there was an appeal, that the appeals court would look at it and say, Judge Taylor gave them a fair trial. And that was my mission every day.
And you tried over 500
Oh,
cases?
We were busy. I was very busy. It was there in the 21 years I tried over 500 jury trials, and then it would be in the thousands of non-jury proceedings, but over 500 jury trials, and the last one being my last jury trial was the Oklahoma City bombing case, the Terry Nichols bombing case.
Justice Taylor, as you alluded to earlier, I'd like to move to your Supreme Court appointment. In 2004, I believe it was,
Right.
Governor Brad Henry appointed you to Justice Supreme Court of Oklahoma to fill a vacancy at that time. How special was that to you to be appointed to the court?
I mean, it's a lifelong. I can't even say it's a lifelong dream, because you don't ever really even ever dream of going on the Supreme Court, because it is such a rare event. I never aspired to come to the Supreme Court, because it's not something you can plan. It's not something that you can set up a plan or a strategy or I'll do this or that in my life so that I end up on the Supreme Court. You can't do it. There's no way to program that. Justice Ralph Hodges, who was my predecessor, had served on the Supreme Court for over 40 years. And he decided in the summer of 2004 to retire. And so that triggered the vacancy. And there were many people applied. And we went through the same process that I described earlier, that everybody applies.
The commission's still in charge.
The Judicial Nominating Commission is in charge of screening the applicants. The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation does full background investigations. The Judicial Nominating Commission interviews all the applicants, and then they choose the top 3 and send those 3 to the governor. And then Governor Brad Henry, in September of 2004, interviewed all 3, me and the other 2 applicants, or nominees at that point. My interview with Governor Henry was nearly 2 hours of intense interview with him. And it wasn't, Governor Henry wasn't asking me, how are you going to rule on this case or that case, or how are you going to rule in this kind of a case. It was more of an interview to get to know me and to get to know what kind of judge I might be or what kind of person I am. I knew him in passing, but did not have a close relationship with him. And so he spent a long time getting to know me better. And of course, he had the entire OSBI background investigation and all the personal information about me. But he interviewed all 3 of us, and then on I think it was September 24th, 2004, I get a phone call late in the afternoon from Governor Henry, and he I think I can remember almost exactly. After saying hello, he said, Judge Taylor, would you do me the honor of accepting my appointment to the Supreme Court of Oklahoma? And I just,
heart is filled with love.
In fact, I think I told him that, I think what I said to him was, Governor, you've made this 55-year-old guy's dream come true, or life change, or something. It was a stunning moment. And then even the fact of him calling, I wasn't sure, because his habit was, and I knew it was his habit, he called all three. He called two of them to say, I'm sorry, I'm not appointing you. And it's to his credit, because, you know, you might have staff call the two who didn't get it, you know, his secretary or somebody. He called all three. So when I got the call as Governor Henry, I thought, well, it can be him calling to say I've been appointed, or him calling to say, you know, sorry, but I've appointed somebody else. And so it was a monumental point of my life to get this phone call. And then about a few days later, I'm up here at this Capitol being sworn in as a Justice of the Supreme Court, and that's been a little over 6 years ago.
Come back and see if I maybe missed a point. Did you then, knowing the vacancy is open, did you apply, or did somebody request your?
You have to apply. Okay. I mean, no one can nominate you.
Okay.
In fact, there is a very long application, 20-page application that takes
so
a long time.
You're not nominated for that.
You're not nominated. You have to apply, and it's quite an effort just to filling out the application.
How has serving on the Supreme Court been different from your previous judicial positions as a trial judge?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I talk about a lot with people, and that is that the 21 years as a trial judge, you every day is just people constantly. You are either in the courtroom with lawyers and witnesses and litigants, jurors sometimes when you're having jury trial, people out in the gallery watching the trial. When you're not in the courtroom, you're in your office, and there's lawyers coming and go, getting orders signed, setting hearings. There are people who have, you know, come to the court for different reasons. Constant traffic, constant dealing with people, constantly in the courtroom, sitting on the bench, listening to witnesses, trying cases, making decisions, nonstop. On the day that I showed up here at the state capitol in the Supreme Court, all of that ended. And it is like, I mean, you're sitting here in my chambers, and you walked in a moment ago, and, you know, you recall walking down the hall, it was quiet.
Yes, sir.
And no, you didn't see anybody, and you walked into my office, and I'm sitting at my desk. Well, that's the typical day of a Supreme Court justice. Wow. It is like going from the busy trial court to a monastery. It is a cloistered, monastic life, purposely so. And that is that we are here, we review cases, and how we review cases, the record from the trial court comes up, the transcripts, the record of all the motions and the orders from the trial court. The lawyers have filed appellate briefs, and we read the briefs, and then from time to time we have oral argument in the courtroom. But it's all, my job now is reading and writing. That's what I do. I look over and research the records from the trial court. I read the briefs. We research and write opinions. And so I may go, oftentimes I will go all day here in this office and see no one but my staff and fellow justices. It's not a come and go busy place at all, and it's intended to be that way. We're not a people don't come, you know, they don't come, there are no trials, there's no witnesses, there's no jurors. It's a completely different process, and it's intended to be that way.
So we were just kind of talking about it's a cloistered life, a little bit different.
It is. It's different. I enjoy it. I love it. It's a, you know, after 21 years in the busy trial court, it's a change, and really in a way life changing, because there would have been a point that I would have been thinking about retiring had I stayed on the trial bench, because after 21 years, you know, there'd be a point where I would say it's time to retire, because but this, when I was appointed to the Supreme Court, it's almost like a new life. And so now I have no thoughts or plans of retiring, where had I been on the trial court, stayed on the trial court, I probably would have either been retired or thinking about retiring now. And so now it's like a new life. It's a new job, a new life. new, I'm back to kind of learning a new job and learning, and enjoying the newness of it, even after 6 years of being on the Supreme Court. So it really has been life-changing. In fact, I saw Governor Henry, I had dinner with Governor Henry last week, and he's going out of office, and I after dinner I visited with him, and I said, you changed my life by appointing me to the Supreme Court. And of course he was very, he said, oh, well, no, I didn't change your life. He said, you're the one that made, he was very nice. I said, no, you changed my life. I said, appointing me to the Supreme Court, it reinvigorated me and my life and my love of the law and my work. And I thanked him, and but it was life-changing.
Well, it's probably, as you explained, more academic in your approach to it.
Much more, yeah.
But how many cases will you actually argue or decide?
Much fewer. I mean,
in a year's time, what would be a normal?
Well, maybe 100 opinions a year. I mean, we're the end of the line. The cases have to go through a long process before they finally end up at the Supreme Court. We are the court of last resort. We're the end of the line, and so we really only get the cases that are really serious final appeal cases, and
often very complex.
And very complex, very important, oftentimes first impression cases, and so we have to spend a lot of time researching and writing and thinking about how we're going to resolve these problems and the issues in this case. And we also have to think about the fact that, well, we're going to resolve this case, but when we resolve this case with a written opinion, then that written opinion becomes the law, and it affects cases in the future. And so we have to be very careful that what we write and what we decide is workable for future cases, and that we don't gum up the law with some strange resolution of this case that can't work in other cases in the future. So we have to not only write for the case before us, but we also have to write for the future. And so the process is longer, much more tedious, much more scholarly, much more academic. As a trial judge, I had to make decisions right then. I mean, an objection's made, you rule on that objection. Objection sustained, objection overruled. Motions are made, you rule on them right then. Rarely did you take time to study things. You just had to be prepared to rule. Well, now I have the luxury of studying everything, taking all the time I need to study it, and then also, when I was a trial judge, I was the only judge. Whatever I said, that was it. Well, now up here there's 9 of us, and we meet every Monday and every Thursday in conference, all 9 of us, and it takes 5 of us to do anything. At least 5 of us. So where I was for 21 years, I was the judge, final say. Now I'm 1 of 9, and it takes 5 of us to do anything. So it's a very deliberative process up here, and can sometimes be tedious and time-consuming, but we give it all the attention it needs so that the product is quality at the end.
You're currently serving as Vice Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I think beginning in January 2011, this next January, you'll be Chief Justice?
Yes, on January 1st, I'll become Chief Justice.
Can you explain the process for how you become, Vice Chief Justice?
We're elected. It's elected by the 9 justices, and there is some purposeful rotation involved, but it's elected by the 9 justices.
Does that change frequently, or
2 years?
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years, I will serve as Chief Justice for 2 years. Okay. And Chief Justice is 2 years is about all that we, the one, those who've served as Chief Justice, they say 2 years is about all you can stand, because it is a very intense, hard, difficult position, because you move out, to a great extent, you move out from so much of the legal work. I mean, you're still involved in the legal work, but you become in effect, the chief executive officer of the entire state judiciary. Every district court, I mean, the Chief Justice is responsible for the administration of every court in Oklahoma, including, for example, the Payne County District Court. The budget of the Payne County District Court has to be approved by the Chief Justice.
Wow.
And so the Chief Justice has 77 county courthouses, 200 and some district judges, 77 court clerks' offices. The budgets for all those offices, all those judges, all those court clerks, then the budgets for all of the appeals courts, the liaison with the governor and the state legislature for the judicial branch of government. So it is a intense 2-year administrative responsibility.
And they're also presiding over cases.
And then doing your regular. Now, the only change is during the time that you're Chief Justice, you are not assigned to write opinions.
Okay.
Now, you vote on every opinion, but you do not write opinions because because you're doing all this administrative work, you're not writing opinions. What I will be doing those 2 years, I'll be reading opinions and voting on opinions, but I won't be writing opinions for the rest of the justices to consider.
Just my sort of take and looking at it, it seems like you got to elect that position of Chief Justice fairly early in your tenure.
It is.
It must be. Was it considered a great honor
Well,
for you by your colleagues?
I would like to think that. It was fairly soon, 6 years. I've been here 6 years. I just, I'm just going to have to work hard to do a good job and earn the confidence that they put in me.
How exciting is that for you?
Well, it really is. I got to be honest. I mean, for a kid from McAlester, I got to just be real honest. For a kid from McAlester to be Chief Justice of Oklahoma is, I never, who'd have thought? I mean, I certainly never thought. So it's a blessing, it's an honor, and then it places on me a huge burden, responsibility that now I've got to really live up to this and do a good job. But it really is for a kid who grew up on Creek Avenue in McAlester, Oklahoma, to be Chief Justice of Oklahoma. I'm still thinking, how did this happen? It's pretty cool.
And you're only the second that I know of, second alumnus of Oklahoma State University to serve on the state Supreme Court.
I think that's correct. Justice Berry.
William A. Berry.
Yeah, Justice Berry and I are the only two, and he graduated. I always claimed to be the only OSU alum because he was an A&M alum.
Right.
So. But Justice Berry graduated Oklahoma A&M, and then me. And as far as we know, and we've done some looking, I can almost say with positive that it's Berry and Taylor are the only two OSU alums.
I think you're right, and of course, and then you'll soon be the only. I guess I don't know if Berry was ever Chief Justice.
He was Chief Justice.
Chief Justice.
Yes,
okay.
He was Chief Justice. So I'll be the second OSU alum to be appointed Supreme Court and the second OSU alum to be Chief Justice.
We're proud of you.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. As I told you, President Hargis was here. He dropped by to visit yesterday, and he came by the office just to talk. He and I have been friends for a long, long time, back when he was a lawyer, long before we ever thought he'd be president of OSU or I'd be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We've known each other for a long time, long before either one of us thought we'd be where we are now. And he dropped by the office yesterday, and what he said, and it made me feel really good. He said, he was that OSU is going to have a Chief Justice, and he said he was really happy about OSU having a Chief Justice, and we had a nice visit.
Speaking of that, Justice Taylor, you've remained closely connected to Oklahoma State University throughout your career.
Yes.
In your life. Can you talk about the relationship and explain why it's been so important to you?
Well, it's been important, for one, because I felt such a tie to the university, and it's through friendships. That's what kept me connected, were the friends that I made. I mentioned Ross McKnight. I've been a friend of Ross McKnight's all of these years. And so Ross and I have seen each other at OSU. That's when we would connect. We would see each other at OSU. I've had the good fortune of becoming very close with Boone Pickens over the years. And of course, that is a connection. that Boone and I have that has, then and Harry Birdwell and Burns Hargis and so many people. And so friendships are one reason that I've maintained that connection with OSU. Secondly, I've maintained the connection with OSU because of just what I said. It taught me so much. The university experience taught me so much. As I said, the laboratory where I learned all this stuff, the laboratory where I made mistakes and knew not to make them again, the laboratory that taught me about leadership and people. So that was the connection. And then generationally, my son, Wilson, decided he had no hesitation. OSU was the only place he wanted to go. He was valedictorian of his McAlester High School graduating class, and probably with his grade point and his ACTs and all, probably could have gone someplace else. OSU, he didn't even apply anyplace else. And he ended up going to OSU and getting his bachelor's degree, and then staying and getting his master's degree in athletic administration. He worked for 3 years as a manager for the OSU basketball team. Worked 1 year for Eddie Sutton and 2 years for Sean Sutton at the OSU basketball. He loves OSU and he's a life member of the Alumni Association. That's what I gave him for his graduation, his life membership in the Alumni Association. And he's got an OSU tag on his car and an OSU alum sticker on his car, and he works for the Thunder now, the NBA team here, basketball operations. But it's just the connection that I've maintained. And then I also had the good fortune of 15 years ago becoming a trustee of the Peterball Foundation, yes, which is a private foundation in McAlester that is much interested in education, much interested in higher education. And over the years, the Peterball Foundation had given some money to OSU, had established a professorship early when I was a trustee. We established a professorship at the library. There's a Peterball professor of library science. Jennifer Postonbaugh is the Peterball professor. And we did that early in my time as a trustee. But over time, the Peterball Foundation had given much, much more money to the University of Oklahoma, mainly because most of the trustees were connected to OU. Well, in 2005, I became chairman of the foundation, and I announced to the trustees that we're going to catch OSU up with OU. And so then we quickly then caught up, and we have since I became chairman, we've established a professorship at the business school, Peterball professor of business law and ethics at the business school. We established a chair to be held by the president, and President Hargis holds the Peterball Chair of Higher Education over at the business school. And so we've now given, the Peterball Foundation has now given OSU a little over $1 million. And I'm really proud of that because I've been able to, as chairman of the foundation, steer some of our higher education giving to Oklahoma State.
It's really, it's turned out to be a lot more than that, hadn't it, with the matches from.
Oh yeah, and then the matches with Boone. I mean, the $1 million we've given, 750,000 of the $1 million we've given qualifies for Pickens match. So it's going to turn into to much more.
Well, kind of talking about their relationship is one example of your serving and chairing the Peterball Foundation. How, in your opinion, how important is alumni engagement to the continuing development and advancement of the university?
No, it's critical. The university, I think the whole concept of I was going to say a state university, but a private university is the same. So I'll just back up and say the concept of a university completely fails if people graduate and walk off campus and that's the end of their relationship with the university. Because part of the university experience is that the alumni of that university come back and continue to give, not just money, but come back to inspire the current students. It's part of the education. While the 4 years I was on campus in that laboratory I've talked about, I can count many, many times that alums would come and speak to different groups. And I can remember being inspired by these guys and women that would come back and speak, and you'd say, my gosh, this guy graduated from OSU, or this lady was OSU graduate, and they've come back and all. So the connection of the alumni to the university is critical. I think the whole concept of the university fails if the alums graduate and walk off that stage with their diploma and take their cap and gown off and then never be seen again. The whole concept fails.
How do you feel about President Hargis' leadership and the direction of the university at this time?
He is there is no question, and it's not just because he's a friend of mine. There is no question he was the right man at the right time at the right place. When the search was going on for the president of OSU, every friend that I had that was involved in the process, and I knew all the regents, and I had every friend that I had that had any influence in the process, what I would say to them was this. I said, the recent history of success in higher education in Oklahoma has been, and you just start naming names, David Boren at OU, Andy Coates at the OU Law School, Glenn Johnson at Southeastern State University and Chancellor of Higher Education, Tom McDaniel at Oklahoma City University, Robert Henry as the Dean of Oklahoma City University Law School, and now later he's president, Roger Webb at the University of Central Oklahoma, George Nye at the University of Central Oklahoma. I know I'm leaving people out, but my point to these friends who were making this decision was the success of higher education in recent time in Oklahoma has been to get an Oklahoman who knows the state and knows the people to lead your university. That's what's worked. I mean, George Nye turned around UCO. David Boren turned around OU. Andy Coates turned around OU Law School. Roger Webb turned around Northeastern at Tahlequah, and now UCO. Glenn Johnson down at Southeastern. And I said to my friends, don't go off someplace to Michigan or Iowa or wherever and find some academic and bring them to OSU, and it's going to take them 2 years to learn to spell Oklahoma and learn what Oklahoma's all about. By the time they even figure out what's going on, they're kind of, people are running circles around OSU. I said, let's get somebody that knows Oklahoma, that Oklahoma knows and respects, that commands immediate attention for the university, and brings good reputation, prestige, and Burns Hargis was the person. He walks in as president of OSU. Everybody in Oklahoma knows Burns Hargis. He knows everybody in Oklahoma. He knows every inch of this state, ran for governor, active in the Bank of Oklahoma all over the state, active, had his TV show, well known, highly qualified, has a Juris Doctor degree, has a doctorate, he has experience, he's a banker, he's a lawyer, he's a politician. Get somebody that can immediately hit the ground and represent OSU. And you can find a provost to handle the academic side, but we need a leader who can represent Oklahoma State University in the political circles, the business circles, the community circles, the citizen circles. Burns Hargis is perfect. So, it was just an obvious choice in my view.
What do you think about, particularly with your background in the Peterbilt Foundation, what do you think about the branding success campaign, the $1 billion campaign in Oklahoma State University?
I think it's I was there the day it was announced. I was there with Boone that day, and I love every bit of it, including the logo and the branding success motto or whatever you call it. It's just, the whole thing is just, I think it's really caught on, and I'm very impressed with the whole effort. And then, of course, there's no way to, and again, I'm not saying this because he's my good friend, but there's no way in the world that we cannot over and over and over and over and over thank Boone Pickens for changing OSU. I mean, not just with $500 million that he's given. And I'm quick to point out that half of that was to academics. Everybody thinks that it's all to athletics, but he's given $500 million, and half of that is to athletics, and half of it to academics. He's changed the university, changed alums' attitude and spirit about the university. So it's not just the money. It's pumped up everybody to get excited about the university, pumped up everybody to give money and give time and love the university. So, you know, in the history of OSU, Boone Pickens, you know, he's up there. I mean, he is up there maybe at the top for turning the place around and putting us on the map in a major way. We can never thank Boone enough for what all he's done.
I know you're an OSU sports fan.
Yes.
As well. And what are your thoughts on OSU's athletics department and their athletics program currently and in the future?
Well, first of all, there's a place where Boone's turned it around. The stadium, the football locker room, the facilities, the new basketball locker room. Those are important because the stadium's important because the fans come and can really be proud and feel good about their university when they come to the stadium. Lewis Field, with all respect, looked like a poor high school stadium in Texas is what it always reminded me of. So the pride factor, and then the recruiting of student athletes, when they come and see those facilities, it's got to be impressive to make them want to come. And athletics is important for the university. I'm not an athlete other than I'm a pretty good runner, but I recognize the importance of athletics to the university because it is kind of I've heard Burns say, it's the front porch. It's how you invite people back into the home through the front porch. You get them coming to basketball games and football games and other athletic events, and it gets them on the front porch and brings them into the house to then become involved otherwise. And it's a way to bring, I mean, just like football game day, you bring 50,000 OSU people together on campus. Well, it can't help but cause them to think about the rest of the campus and what goes on. So it's critically important to the university. And things are going quite well. Mike Holder is doing a great job leading the department, and it's going well. I love going to the football games, and I particularly love the basketball games. I'm partial to basketball. I love basketball actually more than football, but I love them both. But there's nothing like Gallagher-Iba Arena. A great basketball game in Gallagher-Iba Arena. There's really no other sports event to rival a really hard-fought, tough game in Gallagher-Iba Arena when there's 13,000 people there. It's one-of-a-kind experience.
Justice Taylor, you've received numerous awards and recognition from your alma mater, deservedly so, including the Alumni Hall of Fame, Distinguished Alumnus Award, Leadership Legacy, Edna May Phelps, Friends of the Library Award. That's just a few of them, but how special have these recognitions been to you?
When I get to come back on campus, and it's always great, but to have your university say, good job, you've done good, we're proud of you. It's kind of like, having your parents pat you on the back and say you've done good. And so when the university pats you on the back and said you've done good, you've made us proud. It makes me feel good that, because I have such a high regard for the university, that when the university says good job, it really means a lot. It's not just you notice I've got that Alumni Hall of Fame right there at the top,
right.
And I'm very proud of it. I mean, when you walk in my door, that's the first thing you see. And I am very proud of it. That's my university. And when the university says you've done good, it sure makes you feel good.
Looking back over we talked about it before, your lengthy relationship with Oklahoma State, you have some special memories or special moments that you reflect on. You'd mentioned earlier the friendships, but has there been some special events, some special times, some special sort of moments, frozen time that you recall?
When I was on campus, when I was at OSU?
And since all the years of your relationship with OSU?
I think the special moments are getting inducted into the OSU Hall of Fame and the great basketball games at Gallagher-Iba, and then the most special time is just was all that time on campus, and it all kind of just blends in. 4 years, it just blends in. I can't pick a time that is. It's just that 4 years. It was like a one long day, really. I mean, that 4 years went by so fast, and I enjoyed it so much. And I look back on it, and it's just, it's like something I wish I could just go back and just do it over and over, because it was so good. And my fraternity, I got to say, the Kappa Sigma fraternity, a lot of special moments with the brothers that I have and to this day stay in touch with, and living in that fraternity house. I lived in that fraternity house for 4 years, and a lot of my life went by right there in that fraternity house. And so when I go back on campus, I usually go to the house and see how things look and see the guys, and it's real special. So going back to Stillwater is like going home. It really is.
This is a serious question, and you still got some of your career left, but just thinking back on your life, how do you hope people remember Stephen Taylor?
That he was a thoughtful, fair guy. That he thought about serious things and had to make a lot of tough decisions, and that I hope people will say he had to make a lot of tough decisions, and they were all fair, that he was fair about making those tough decisions. That's really what I hope people say, that he was fair, because that's really the whole central part of my life right now, is doing things, following the law, and being fair about the tough decisions that we have to make.
It's been a great interview. What have we left out? Some thoughts you've had? Any questions? Have they started anything in your mind you'd like to talk about? Or
No, I don't know. I can't think of anything that I mentioned just in passing the Oklahoma City bombing trial. That's just something that's just part of Oklahoma history. But I was called on to do that Oklahoma City bombing trial, and that was probably if I had to, up to this point, that it's the toughest duty I've had, and the most important probably case I've had, and so. But there's a lot written about that other places.
Well, and purposely, I think I would hope at some point we'd do a follow-up interview, talk about more of your legal career, your cases.
Well,
this is more about your relationship with the university. But having said that, just as you think back on some special cases and special recognition, and you've received a lot of recognition, can you think back on some of the awards recognition you've had, special cases you had?
Well, the Oklahoma City bombing case is obviously the biggest. I tried a lot of murder cases and a lot of Terry Nichols. Bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing case, a lot of murder cases. Probably, I was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 2009, and that's a culmination of a life in Oklahoma that I'm really proud of. Again, it's one of those things that when I was called and told that I had been voted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, is like again, the kid from McAlester, how'd that happen? But it's something that I really appreciate and feel blessed to have, or that recognition. But anyway, I can't think of anything else.
I appreciate it.
I'm still just a kid from McAlester, really. I really am. And I really am. I'm just still a kid from McAlester who is working every day to learn, do a little better every day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.